Good evening, everyone. Welcome you all for the IGNA Endorsed Webmaster Series 2021. Due to technical glitches, the part of yesterday's session has been will be dealt today. The speaker for the day is Dr. Anil Terigopalu, and he'll be talking to us on immunology of renal transplantation. Dr. Anil Terigopalu is a senior consultant and clinical coordinator, laboratory services at MGM Health Care System at Chennai, and he is also interested towards histopathology and cytology, transplantation, immunology, and his inclination is also towards diagnostic molecular pathology. Over to Dr. Anil Terigopalu to deliver his talk on immunological aspects of renal transplantation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Kalaimani, and also to Dr. Georgie, who is a senior colleague and very respected nephrologist at MGM Healthcare now. Sorry about the Okay, is it visible now?
Yeah, it's visible, sir.
Yeah. So when we talk about transplant, HLA and MHC and transplantation, these are all things which we talk about in renal transplant, all solid organ transplants, as well as bone marrow transplantation. And basically transplantation, when you talk about its act of transferring cells, tissues or organs from one site to another. And when you do a transplant between two individuals, the major barrier to transplantation is the body's immune system. And we learn about the immune system and how it causes rejection, and also what are the cells and mechanisms involved in immunology of transplantation today. The default setting, immune system is basically required for eliminating everything that is foreign, whether it is an infection or a malignant disease. And it should be unresponsive to self and to benign tissues in the body. It should not cause self-damage. In the context of transplantation, we talk about immunology causing either rejection or a graft versus host disease. And a successful transplantation depends upon overriding this default setting. You know that either you do compatibility testing or you remove the harmful agents like antibodies before you actually transplant. So subverting this particular thing is important for a successful transplant. Traditionally, we all thought that, okay, we do a cross match. Donor cells it's a mini transplant done in a laboratory before the actual transplant happens. Traditionally, we thought if the transplant is positive, we do not transplant. If it is negative, we go ahead and transplant. But there are a lot of changes to those views, and we'll see how it has changed over a period of time. Now, what are the main immunological barriers to transplant or anything to do with immunology between two individuals? There are three main systems which play a role in histocompatibility, defining histocompatibility of an individual. We have the ABO blood group antigen system, where only there are three alleles, A, B, or O. The polymorphism is very small, but the immunogenicity it's a very tall ask to subvert this mechanism. Now, major histocompatibility antigens, or in humans, it is called the human leukocyte antigen system. It is highly polymorphic, we'll see how, and it is also highly immunogenic and the most significant in terms of transplantation. Minor histocompatibility antigens, including the Y chromosome related antigens and some antigens which are related to class 1 molecules. Here also you have too much of polymorphism, but usually you don't look at it much because they are not very immunogenic. Now, ABO is basically the tallest ask to surmount in terms of antigenicity. ABO blood group antigens, these are nothing but carbohydrate structures that are expressed on red blood cells and also most of the tissues derived from embryonic mesoderm origin, including the vascular endothelial cells, which are the center of action of all immunologic rejections. Now, a little bit about the ABO groups. So we know that you have antigen A, antigen B, and antigen A and B in AB blood group, neither of antigen A or B in O group, and neither of A, B, or H in the H oral Bombay type of blood group. Now, there is a Landsteiner Lanston's law, which states that whichever ABO antigens are lacking on a given person's RBCs, that is whichever antigens are not present in an individual, that person will always have corresponding antibody to the isohemagglutinin. Basically, these are very simple polysaccharide antigens. So the gut flora cross reacts with most of these antigens, and if the person's if the self antigens are not there, so for example, in case of antigen A is not present in an individual, anti-B antibodies are produced because the thymus will still be processing these antibodies as non-self. So anti-B are constitutively present. So if you do not have a certain antigen, you always develop the antibody. The antibody for the antigen which is not present in the individual is always present in high levels. You see the density is 10 to the power of 6 per cell, number of copies of these antigens present on the cell. So this is a very strong immunologic system. Now, a little bit about ABO system, sorry. So we know that all the particular antigen you're talking about, it has a precursor molecule, and it is modified into an H antigen in the initial course, and the ABO gene, which determines the antigenicity of this H antigen, the A allele will convert it to an A antigen by addition of an epitope on one aspect of the molecule. The B allele will act on the precursor and convert it to a B antigen, while the O allele does not act on it, and it just leaves it as it causes the persistence of H antigen. So you do not have H antibodies if there is an O group, but some people have a polymorphism for the H antigen, where H antigen is not recognized by the O allele and is not recognized by the system. So the person will have A, B, and H antibodies. That is a Bombay blood group. So that is an important thing to understand. So that will be detected only when you do both forward and reverse typing in ABO blood grouping testing. Now, the second group that we talked about other than the HLA was the autoantigens and minor histocompatibility antigens. So when you talk about immunology, you're talking about molecules which raise antibodies in a different individual, right? But some of these antigens can be produced in self also. For example, in the heart, vimentin and cardiac myosin, collagen 5 and K-alpha tubulin in the lung, agrin and angiotensin 2 receptor type 1 in kidney transplantation, these play a role in histocompatibility, the successful transplantation, because they produce self-antibodies also post-transplant. Minor histocompatibility antigens, mostly you talk about the HY antigens which are present in the male, and these cause issues in a female recipient receiving the male organ. And MHC class 1 related chain, MICA and MICB antigens, these are involved in activation of natural killer cells and some T cells. Normally they are present on low levels in various cells, including monocytes, epithelial cells, and endothelial cells. But when you have cellular stress, for example, in ischemia reperfusion injury, these play a significant role in solid organ transplant also sometimes. So when you talk about major histocompatibility complex, which is the most significant and most widely studied system of immunological activity in terms of transplantation. In fact, it was the product of ongoing research in transplantation studies on inbred mice. So let us see what MHC is, and it is basically, when you talk about MHC, you're talking about adaptive immunity. So we know innate immunity is basically doesn't have memory. It is non-learning, hardwired system of immune responses in the body, which includes physical chemical barriers, blood proteins, including complement components in the blood, and cells like phagocytes, the natural killer cells, macrophages, neutrophils. Adaptive immunity is a learning system which is mainly involved in identification or recognition of non-self antigens and raising antibodies and cell responses. The central activity of the entire major histocompatibility complex or immune response or allorecognition is T cells recognizing cell-associated antigens which are presented by the MHC on the major histocompatibility complex molecules on the antigen-presenting cells. Let us see how. Now, this I already mentioned that this is one unique system. We all knew that we had immune responses, but we did not know that there was a certain complex of a few genes located very closely on a certain chromosome, which were involved in this. So these were discovered from studies of tissue transplantation, and these were mainly following the work of George Snell, who worked elaborately on inbred mice. There are various models. Anybody interested can go and see the experiments that he did. Some of those rules that he formulated for organ transplantation are still valid. And the MHC complex in the human is basically the human leukocyte antigen system. Jean Dechert and Jean von Rode, these are the two guys who discovered this by searching for cell surface molecules to identify how the system was recognizing foreign from self. Now there are class 1 and class 2 MHC molecules. These two are structurally different but similar in function. So we will see how. And these are there are also in the same complex other non-polymorphic genes which are involved in antigen presentation. Both the maternal and paternal alleles of these genes and all the genes involved in a particular class are co-dominantly expressed. Means if you have a certain gene, definitely it will form an antigen and express it on the surface of the cells. Class 1, class 2 MHC genes are most polymorphic genes. So we'll understand what is polymorphism. We all know what it is. It's a variety of alleles present in the population. Now, other thing to understand is every species has its own unique MHC genes. In humans, it is HLA, but by and large, it's a preserved kind of structure where you have class 1, class 2, and class 3 molecules across species. In humans, it is very important for us to understand what is classic HLA. Classic HLA, we have class 1 and class 2, I have already mentioned. So class 1 has only one gene for each molecule that it presents on the surface. So in classical class 1 HLA is A, B, and C. The entire HLA is present on the short arm of chromosome 6, and it is totally about 3.5 million bases in length. And the classic HLA, the ones in red, are the A, B, and C for class 1. In class 2, you have a molecule with A and B chain forming. DRA and DRB chain will form one molecule on the surface. So you have DRA, DRB. DRB has, every single individual will have DRA and DRB1. But there are certain individuals who may have DRB3 to DRB8, depending on how many of these genes are actually expressed on the surface. So these are variably expressed. But constitutively, you have DR, DQ, and DP. Each of these loci will have two genes, DRA and DRB, DPB and DPA, DQA and DQB. And some individuals will have extra variety of expressed surface genes, antigens. To just enumerate few differences between the class 1 and class 2 MHC molecules, class 1 molecules are expressed on all nucleated cells. Maximum expression is on B cells. All self-nucleated cells will have class 1 molecules. B cells have the maximum expression. They're not expressed much on fibroblasts, liver cells, muscle cells, neurons, sperm cells. And in case of placenta and sperm cells, these are not expressed on the surface. That's why we do not have rejection of placenta, which is foreign to the mother's own tissues. Class 2 MHC molecules are expressed on specialized antigen presenting cells, including macrophages, dendritic cells, B cells, thymus epithelial cells. These are specialized cells. They have a special function of antigen presentation. Now, class 1 molecules have only alpha chain, and the other part of it is made up structurally by the beta 2 microglobulin. Class 2 molecules have two chains. These are heterodimers of alpha and B chain. And there are certain areas where polymorphism is there, and these are the ones which are antigen binding sites. Alpha 1 and alpha 2 domains of the chain, one single chain in class 1. Between alpha 1 and beta 1 domains of alpha and beta chains in class 2. Now, talking about, there's a class restriction for this. We'll look about it in the next one. Okay, just to show you again, class 1 molecule, I said there is A, B, and C only. So A gene will produce this antigen on the surface, and structurally to be present on the surface, this will bind with beta 2 microglobulin and form the surface antigen. Class 2 molecules, there is a A and B chain, like DRA and DRB, both together will come and form the surface antigen, the MHC class 2 molecule. Beta 1 and alpha 1 domains of these. This is in between the alpha 1 and alpha 2 of class 1, and the alpha 1 and beta 1 domains is the peptide binding cleft, where antigens are bound to the MHC molecule and presented to the T cells. So main function of MHC molecules in normal individuals is to present antigens in the form of small peptide molecules of unique sequences to the CD8 plus T cells and the CD4 plus T cells, so that they recognize and trigger an immune response. So class 1 and class 2 molecules, the presentation of antigens is slightly different. Class 1 molecules, they are usually seen to present intracytoplasmic viruses, intracytoplasmic parasites, the tumor cells, the non-self neoantigens in the case of cancer cells, those are presented with class 1 molecules. Those are bound to the class 1 molecules and expressed on the surface to be recognized by the CD8 plus T cells. Class 2 MHC will have extracellular pathogens digested in endocytic vesicles. The class 2 molecules are manufactured separately in the endoplasmic reticulum. These are separately used to identify the specific peptide sequences as digested products of the endocytosed pathogens and expressed on the surface and presented to the CD4 plus T cells for antigen recognition. Now we were talking about polymorphism. Polymorphism is nothing but the number of variants of a particular gene present in the entire population. So we know that these are highly polymorphic. That's why we are the chance of recognition of these class 1 or class 2 MHC molecules as non-self, if they are not full match, is very high between two individuals. That is, they are both in normal function. They are helpful in recognizing a multiple antigens and presenting it to the T cells. In transplantation scenario, these also become the target of presentation. These also become antigens to be presented by the self MHC molecules to the recipient's immune system. So polymorphism arises from mainly from the peptide binding cleft and some sequences which are adjoining the peptide binding cleft in the case of class 1 molecules in one chain. And polymorphism is restricted to the beta chain of, mostly restricted to the beta chain of the class 2 molecules. So we saw that the function of MHC molecules is to present the antigens to the T cell receptors on the T cells, whether it is CD8 plus or CD4 plus T cells in conjunction with MHC1 or 2. But this one single binding is not enough. So you have other molecules, co-stimulatory molecules. Once the first signal of binding of the MHC molecule to the T cell receptor in conjunction with the CD4 co-receptor happens, you need other co-stimulatory pairs to happen. So this particular thing is very interesting. CD28 binding with CD80 on the APC. This to circumvent this, we have one drug also called belatacept. So these are also mechanisms by which you can prevent activation of T cells. So let us see the properties of these MHC molecules. Each molecule consists of these are trans-domain molecules. They have an extracellular domain, they have a trans-membrane domain and an intracellular signaling domain. And polymorphic amino acid residues of MHC molecules are mostly restricted to the peptide binding clefts. Non-polymorphic regions, they are used for hand holding the CD4 and CD8 molecules on the respective T cell subpopulations to handhold and present antigens to them. So though these MHC molecules are identifying certain peptides and presenting it to the T cell receptors, it is the sequence of amino acids and the structure of the T cell receptor which is going to define the fine specificity of the individual antigen. So basically class 1 molecule or a given class 1 molecule or a class 2 molecule can bind to multiple antigens of the same type and help in presenting to the naive T cells for recognition. So it is not very specific, but yes, specific to a group of antigens. Now, one thing very important, other than being polymorphic, that is, in the population, we have multiple alleles present for each of these. These are also polygenic. When you talk about class 1 molecule, we are talking about any of these. Class 1 can be either A, B, or C from both mother and father in a given individual. In case of class 2, you have DR, DP, DQ, and DR. And In some individuals, we have seen that some individuals also express DRB3, DRB4, and DRB5. These are not present universally, but in some, these are expressed. Many of the people, they are not expressed. So it's important to identify these antigens also if you're looking for a successful match. Most of the times we look for a negative cross match, not a match, but when we are matching, these antigens also become important when typing. So look at the diversity. If somebody is very closely wed in consanguineous families, you will find that an individual can be homozygous at each of these loci. A, B, and C can be the same from both the parents. The person might have inherited the same alleles. Both mother and father, maternal, paternal alleles will be similar, and eventually they express only if entirely they are having homozygosity at all the 6 loci. You may have a diversity as low as 6 types of HLA molecules, 3 of class 1 and 3 of class 2. While if the person differs at every single locus and also has additional DRB4, DRB5, you can have a highly polygenic kind of antigen presentation. You can have more diversity of antigens. So between individuals, the number of HLA molecules, on the surface, class 1, class 2, diversity also varies depending on whether they have same alleles or diverse alleles. So what is the importance of polymorphism and polygenism in MHC? Polygyny, we have each individual has multiple MHC molecules. So this ensures that there is a diversity of antigen recognition. So I told you already that there is an MHC molecule can recognize a group of antigens and present them to individual T cell receptors. So the diversity is much more if you have more genes than in a homozygous condition. High polymorphism of classical MHC molecules helps in ensuring that the diversity in MHC gene expression protects the population as a whole. If any antigen, there will always be certain individuals who are going to raise a successful immune response to almost any antigen which comes into which causes a challenge to the population. For example, even in COVID, there were some people who have not raised immune response, some people have raised successful immune response. So polymorphism ensures wiping out of population. But always remember that however polymorphic a gene or even polygyny we talk about, when we talk about a certain individual, you have the same 2 alleles from birth to death. So we are going to carry only 2 alleles at a single gene locus. A will have 2, maternal, paternal, they may be same or different, but at any given gene locus, the identification of antigen, MHC molecule will stay the same throughout life. Inheritance wise, it is Mendelian inheritance, important in understanding this, because sometimes HLA is also used as a surrogate to identify relationship. So this is mainly Mendelian inheritance. And you have codominant expression, maternal, paternal alleles, and all the 3 genes are expressed equally as class 1 molecules. Now, one important thing that all of us need to understand is class 1 antigens. They are always, class 1 antigens are restricted to present the antigens. Class 1 HLA molecules will present antigens only to class cytotoxic CD8 positive T cells. That is T cells which have CD8 molecules on the surface. Only if presentation happens with the CD8 T cells on the to the MHC molecules, they will be recognized. Helper CD4 plus T cells are restricted to recognizing class 2 MHC antigens. Class 2 MHC molecules will present antigens specifically to CD4 plus T cells, because the non-polymorphic domain will dock only to the CD4 or CD8 of respective specificities. Since we have so much of polymorphism and we also need to have a system of nomenclature, there is a WHO system for naming these HLA molecules. Whichever typing you use, mostly HLA typing currently is by molecular methods, by sequencing. So we need to understand, when you read a HLA report, we should understand what exactly it means. So according to WHO nomenclature, we have HLA as the prefix for the locus. Then you have the gene separated by a hyphen, A, B, C, DPDQ, DR. In case of DPDQ, it will be DPA, DPB, like that. Then you have a separator to identify the gene group in the first position. So usually this, up to the first position, this corresponds to the old serologic groups. Not a rule, but by and large, most of these gene groups will correspond to the old serologic groups. The second position is the I mean, it identifies the particular amino acid sequence. So functionally, it is enough to do a typing up to the second field, where you identify the exact and the HLA molecule amino acid sequence. Now we know that there is redundancy in the genetic code. So the next separator is used to identify differences between the same amino acid sequences at the nucleotide level because of genetic code redundancy. Then there are non-coding regions. Introns and exons are there. Intronic differences are identified in the last field, field 4. So for a high resolution typing, it is enough. Any typing which involves the first 2 fields is high resolution. Beyond that, it may be third field or fourth field, but high resolution always requires at least 2 fields. Now, just to take a look at the polymorphisms involved at class 1 and class 2 alleles. The total number of class 1 alleles as of today is about 22,000. Class 2 alleles about 8,000. So there are 22,000 different sequences identified for genes which code for class 1 and 8,000 plus for class 2 as of today. So it's a highly diverse system. In class 1, the most diverse genes are the A, B, and C. Polymorphism is very high. And there are some null alleles. So there are certain sequences which do not express the antigen on the surface. So it is important in case of bone marrow transplantation where you need to find an exact match. So the chance of finding an exact match is better if you also identify null alleles, and then you can increase the pool of donors. So in class 2, if you see the diversity, the maximum diversity is in DP, only DR, DQ, and DP. These are the significant ones. The two, if we have already seen that the polymorphism is mostly seen in the beta chain, the DRB, DQB, and DPB. So across the population for DPA, there are only 5 different sequences identified across the 8 billion population. Whatever has been typed so far, HLA typing has been done. We have identified only 5 different variants. But if you see DPB1, it is 1749. DRB, it is 3701. And within the DRB locus, the DRB1 gene has the maximum diversity. DRB3, B4, B5, not expressed in everyone. They also have high polymorphism. So some of these things we have seen. We have talked about inheritance, restriction, and polymorphism and diversity. Cross-reactivity is something which we need to understand. I will come to the cross-reactivity when we talk about antibodies and how antigens are recognized and antibodies come through. But in case of solid organ transplants, there are certain terminologies that we use. When you talk about mismatch or a match, you're talking about acceptable matches and unacceptable mismatches. So if there are antigens, non-self antigens in the donor against the recipient, that is a mismatch. So it's a one way you're looking at donor to recipient match. So you can have a HLA identical match. You can have a zero mismatch where the recipient may have A3, but there is A1 which is already there in, donor may have, donor does not have A3 in the recipient, but it is acceptable because he has self A1. Similarly, you have a zero mismatch even if it is homozygous at the other one. Without donor does not have antigens apart from the recipient, it is no mismatch. So based on that, you can have a 1DR mismatch up to 6 antigens match. So matching wise, if you look at it, is best match is when it is identical, and worst match is when all the 6 antigens are non-identical. So it's also important because you use a lot of antibody tests. Apart from doing the typing, you also use antibody tests. So it is important to understand what is recognized as non-self in this HLA molecule. So what is it? What are the recognition sites? These are called epitopes. So antibodies are produced against a part of the face of this particular HLA molecule, and epitopes they can be unique to a particular type, but most of the times, most of these antigens will have multiple epitopes on the surface. So there are unique amino acid sequences and configurations which are identified as non-self by the recipient's immune system. So, and antibodies are raised against that. Epitope is nothing but a part of an antigen against which a specific antibody is made. A particular antigen A2 may have multiple epitopes. Most of the times that is the rule. Most of them have multiple epitopes. One HLA molecule will have multiple antibody targets. One antibody can bind to multiple HLA molecules. So basically, why is it so? Each of these different types, when you call about antigens, A2, A68, these are some of the antigens. We have not listed all the polymorphisms, but each of them will have something unique. One or two unique private epitopes will be there, but they also have something called as public epitopes, that is epitopes which are shared. So if this particular antigen is exposed to a particular recipient, they may raise antibodies against this and this. So if sensitization will be either through blood transfusion, pregnancy, multiple pregnancies, or you have previous transplant, or sometimes by human cell line vaccines also. So if the prior sensitization has happened to a cell carrying the A2 antigen, it will cross react with the other types also, the A68, A69, B57, which have the same epitopes on the surface. They will also, the antibodies raised against this will cross react with these types. So these are called cross reacting groups of antigens. So basically, antigens are nothing but they're collections of epitopes. While all the 4 epitopes are, for example, you consider 4 antigens, let us say they have 4 different epitopes. All of them are expressed on more than one antigen. So these share this, these are shared on this, but the combination is unique on each. So basically, antigen, HLA antigen, what you talk about is a unique combination of multiple epitopes, some of which are private, some of which are shared. The other concept is of applets and triplets. This I'm not going to confuse you too much into this, because these will become more relevant in future when we start doing epitope analysis rather than doing antigen and antibody matching. So the idea is that let us say this is the surface, this is the antigen presentation phase of the HLA molecule. There are sequences of unique sequences of 3 amino acids which are recognized by epitopes on the epitope, which is recognized by the antibody. And sometimes they may not be on the same continuous chain, but by the protein folding and unique spatial arrangement of these amino acids, they are recognized as antigenic sites or epitopes. So these are called triplets and applets. So when we start using epitope analysis in future, when we have proper databases to support that, even now we are doing epitope analysis in transplantation, but coming days we'll have tools, validated tools to use that as to identify the risk of immunologic response during transplantation. So one thing we need to remember is there are no antibodies made against self-HLA. So there are no HLA autoantibodies in an individual. So for example, if to understand what is this cross reactivity, let us suppose that initial first time graft was had A1, A2, against which the recipient had a mismatch at A2 and produced antibodies, anti-A2 antibodies, which had epitopes which were shared by all these different specificities, the antigenic specificities of HLA molecules. So these groups of HLA antigens which share epitopes, these are called as cross-reactive groups. These are very important to understand because, for example, if you have a person who has been sensitized to A1 antigen prior to the transplant, he will his antibodies will he'll have preformed antibodies which can cross-react with any of these types. And these all the HLA polymorphisms are not uniform across the population. Some of them are in higher abundance in population. The diversity, though the diversity is there, a higher percentage of population expresses these. So he will have a chance of a positive cross match against 78% of the population. That is what is CPR, calculated panel reactive antibodies. This is a percentage which is calculated based on population diversity and the antibodies present in the recipient prior to transplant. So there are certain large cross-reactive groups like BW6 and BW4 which are unique in that they share their epitopes with a lot of other antigens in the HLA locus. So we know that because of the polymorphism, see, one thing we need to understand is HLA is very important in immune response to certain to antigens, because the diversity is a must, because we need to identify multiple antigens to be able to present to our own CD4 plus and CD8 plus T cells to raise an immune response. But in the case of transplantation, these HLA molecules, which are basically glycoproteins on the surface of cells, these are expressed on the surface of cells, and when these are presented as antigens because of the diversity and immunogenicity of these molecules, they are presented to the recipient's HLA system and identified as non-self, and then you have a rejection raised against it. Because of the diversity, because of the same property that helps us in identifying antigens, in the context of transplantation, the same thing transforms into a barrier. Also, what is the other way to know that HLA is a barrier? Because across various series of studies, major groups of nephrology teams which have published their studies, they have shown that higher the number of HLA mismatches, the survival of the 5-year survival of grafts also goes down, irrespective of their prior sensitization status or whatever. And it is also important because HLA and antibodies raised against HLA, which can cause damage both through cellular rejection and through antibody mediated rejection, will cause organ damage. So we have so far understood what are the barriers. We understood about the ABO system. We understood about the minor histocompatibility systems. We understood about the HLA system and its properties. Now let us go into the mechanisms of adaptive immunity in transplantation. So central to the transplantation immune responses are the T cells. What are T cells? These are lymphocytes which are defined by the expression of T cell receptors. This is the most important molecule on the surface of T cells, which helps in immune response. So we'll see the structure and also the function of that. So all T cells develop in the thymus from bone marrow derived hematopoietic progenitors, where they are educated to recognize foreign. I'm not going to details of immune tolerance, immune deletion, all those things, but we know that these are educated to recognize foreign antigens present in the context of self-MHC molecules. The T cells which express self-antigens are deleted in the thymus, and only the non-self recognizing T cells are in circulation. So MHC class restriction is defined as recognition of MHC class 2 molecules in conjunction with CD4 expressing T cells. CD8 expressing T cells will recognize antigens which are presented in conjunction with class 1 molecules. We have already seen this. So once these T cells have emigrated from the thymus, they continuously circulate through the peripheral secondary lymphoid organs, and they are continuously surveying the body for antigen presenting cells which are having antigens bound on the surface, which can have a key and lock mechanism with the T cell receptors on the surface of these naive T cells which are not yet activated. Recognition of foreign antigens of the transplanted graft is referred to as allorecognition. When you say allorecognition, it is nothing but non-self antigens being recognized by the T cell receptors. So T cell mediated immune responses can be divided into 4 steps. One is allorecognition. First is recognition of non-self antigen. Second is activation of the T cell on which the antigen presentation to which the antigen has been presented. Then the T cells differentiate into various subgroups with different functions. And then you have T cells, cytotoxic T cells migrating and destroying the graft. So you have helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells both active in T cell immune responses. So we were talking about T cell receptors. T cell receptors are present on the surface of T cells. They have alpha and beta chains. This particular part of the T cell receptor, which is the antigen binding cleft, this is one of the unique property of this is naive T cells have a lot of T cell rearrangements. So these are after the T cells are produced, the progenitor T cells, they undergo recombination of variable and diverse subchains of their genes. The various there are about 23 to 24 diverse things. There are 22 to 24 genes in the diversity region. There are multiple genes present in the variability region and in the junction region. So the D, J, and V chains, when they recombine, the permutations and combinations of these produce so many different configurations at the T cell receptor peptide binding cleft, which is the antigen recognition cleft of the T cell receptors. So each of these naive T cells will carry different structures at the T cell receptor binding cleft. Stability of this is ensured by the epsilon and gamma chains, and they also have a signaling pathway inside, a signaling mechanism inside the cell. So it is important. T cell receptor is central to the recognition of non-self antigens presented in conjunction with the HLA molecules. The specificity of antigen recognized by the T cells is determined by the sequence or the configuration of the T cell receptor cleft. Now, there are three different ways of T cell allo recognition. So one is a direct pathway where the donor antigen presenting cells, the specialized antigen presenting cells like dendritic cells and macrophages, which already have the MHC molecules of the donor, they express it to the, they bind to the recipient's T cells and activate the immune system. So the donor antigen present, not the self antigen presenting cells, donor antigen presenting themselves present the antigens, the donor antigens to the recipient T cells. There is an indirect pathway where the broken down fragments or components of the membranes of these antigen presenting cells and other tissues which express the MHC molecules on the surface, they are ingested by the recipient's antigen presenting cells, processed into peptides and presented in conjunction with MHC molecules to the T cell receptors in the recipient's immune system. The other one is where a semi-direct pathway is there. These are just how the antigens are processed and presented to the antigen presenting cells of the recipient, to the T cells of the recipient for allo recognition. You can have just these donor vesicles with the membrane already having the MHC complex on the surface, going and getting recognized by the recipient's antigen presenting cell and presenting the antigen to the T cell. So there are either direct, indirect or semi-direct. So you can have direct by donor antigen presenting cells to the T cells. Recipient cells can present in direct and semi-direct ways to the T cells of the recipient. So T cell activation is once the MHC molecule, this is the antigen presenting cell with the MHC molecule on the surface. This is the peptide antigen which is being presented to the T cell receptor on the T cell. Now, in the case of helper T cell, you have the CD4 molecule. This is the class restriction you're talking about. If it is class 2 MHC, it is CD4. Only when this docks to the non-polymorphic site of the MHC molecule, this binding will be stable. Once this binding is stable, where CD4 molecule has docked and also the antigen at the MHC molecule has been presented to the T cell receptor, this is the signal 1. But this is not enough to stimulate the cell to respond. This is just recognition by the T cell receptor. But for the T cell activation, you need downstream. Once this happens, there is a downstream activation of calcineurin MAP kinase pathways. So we know that there are inhibitors that we use for these, like the most common drugs like tacrolimus and cyclosporine. These are the ones which are involved in inhibiting the calcineurin pathways, and basically calcineurin pathway, once it is activated, it causes activation of certain transcription of gene sequences in the DNA that stimulate the expression of co-receptor molecules. We also saw that the signal is not complete for activation unless there is a signal 2. So once these genes are transcribed after binding of this, the second signal is where co-receptors like CD28 on the T cell binds to the CD80 or CD86 molecule on the antigen presenting cell. This results in the second, activation of further downstream pathways and release of interleukins. The interleukins, once they are released, they bind these, this stable signal 2 causes activation of expression of IL-2 receptors, IL-15 receptors, and the initial signal which has released the cytokines, these are recognized by the interleukin receptors on the surface of the cell, which helps in which activates the T cell to go in for cell division. Basically, this T cell gets activated, it gets selected to multiply and make multiple copies because it has been identified as a T cell which has specificity to the target protein antigen which is being presented to it. So this gets selected and multiplies to contain the antigen by raising an immune response. How does it raise the immune response? By differentiate the T cells. Once they have been stimulated to multiply, they will start differentiating based on the interleukins that are the environment in which they are present. A naive T cell, once it is activated, it differentiates into Th1, Th2, T follicular helper cell, and T regulatory cells, T17, Th17 type, and Th9. So basically Th1 is nothing but this subset is activated when you have intracytoplasmic pathogens like viruses and neoantigens in cancer. Th2 response is activated when you have extracellular pathogens or extracellular antigens being presented through class 2 molecules. You have follicular helper cells which are present in the lymphoid follicles. They stimulate the lymphoid follicles to produce germinal centers and differentiate into B cells which can produce antibodies. You have Th17 which is basically named after the interleukins they secrete, Th17. This helps in recruiting other innate immune cells like macrophages, neutrophils, eosinophils. Basically all the other granulocytes and macrophages are recruited by Th17 response. Th9 response is basically because of interleukin 9, which is secreted in the environment required for Th9 differentiation is interleukin 9, and this is involved in partly in fibrosis. And T regulatory cells are another subset of specialized T cells which are which basically act by suppressing the immune response and they act as feedback mechanism. So once the T cells are activated, it's not one group of cells, they multiply and differentiate into different groups. So you in allograft biopsy also, when you see, you have you have CD3 positive T cells. Sometimes you also have neutrophils and eosinophils which have been recruited because of the differentiation. And one more thing to remember is this differentiation has plasticity. That is, one type of Th response can also transmutate into or transdifferentiate into other types depending on changes in the local environment in the organ. Now, we have spoken about the helper cells before. Now you talk about the cytotoxic T lymphocytes. Cytotoxic T lymphocytes, when they are presented with the antigen by the MHC molecule in conjunction with the CD8 molecule on the T cell, the activation causes two types of effects. One is the T cell will aggressively release granzymes and perforins, which basically bore holes into the membranes of the target cells and kill them directly. So it induces direct cell death by cytolysis. The second pathway is by expression of Fas ligand, which is CD95 ligand, which is a ligand for the receptor Fas or CD95 on the surface of target cells. Once these are expressed on the surface and bound to the ligand is bound to the receptor, the downstream causes apoptosis of the cells, target cells. So either the cytotoxic T cells induce cell death by cytolysis or by apoptotic pathways. Now about the B cells. B cells so far have been they have been less illustrative in their responses because not so much was talked about except for antibodies being produced. One very important thing to understand is B cells are also one type of specialized antigen presenting cells. They have the antigen presenting B cells have immunoglobulin D moieties on the surface which can present antigens just like the MHC molecules. And these were previously viewed as secondary players, but then we know that main function is production of antibodies directed against graft antigens. And B cells, they develop in the fetal liver or bone marrow, and they mature at these sites or emigrate as immature B cells or transitional B cells to further mature in the peripheral lymphoid organs. You have majority of these naive B cells recirculating through the mostly they are circulating across the lymphoid or secondary lymphoid organs. If you see the peripheral circulation, 85 to 90% of circulating lymphocytes are T cells, and around 10 to 15% of circulating lymphocytes are B cells. So B cells are mostly circulating within the secondary lymphoid organs. Donor-specific antibodies are produced by these B cells. They are an effect of recruitment by the they are obviously antibody production is T cell dependent in majority of the pathways. So antibodies, when you talk about donor-specific antibodies, you have short-lived antibody secreting cells and long-lived antibody secreting cells, which are plasma cells or memory B cells. We'll see what these exactly are in the coming slides. They're also and the short-lived antibody secreting cells, they are also known to produce transient DSAs, which at a particular time you may be detecting it in a antibody screen, but after repeated testing, they may actually disappear. This is relevant in terms of mostly 1 or 2 red cell perfusions, red cell transfusions, if you have given, the person may most likely will have a short-lived antibody response. They may not produce to the extent of having memory cells and plasma cells. So the 2 main functions of B cells are production of antibodies and antigen presentation to T cells, and also they are known to produce cytokines. Now, B cell receptor we were talking about, it is also similar to in structure to the MHC molecule, but it's mostly an immunoglobulin molecule. All antibodies by rule are proteins, and they are immunoglobulins of either G, A, M, D, E subtypes. Now, on the surface of the cell, all the immunoglobulins are expressed as monomers in soluble, while in circulation, some of these like IgA has a dimeric format, and IgM forms pentamers. And IgM and IgG can fix complement, which is relevant when you talk about complement dependent cytotoxicity testing. Now, B cells, they are activated either by T cell dependent pathway, where the B cells present, I told you the B cells will present the antigen directly to the helper T cells and cause production of high affinity antibodies, memory B cells, and long-lived plasma cells. A T cell dependent B cell activation is a long-lived response. A T cell independent response happens when the antigen is non-protein, usually polysaccharide protein, and they are mainly going to produce IgM molecules, IgM antibodies, which are low affinity antibodies, and they are short-lived plasma. They're produced by these short-lived plasma cells. So anything which has to have a long-lasting immune response or memory needs to have a T cell dependent pathway. So B cell differentiation, we have seen naive B cells, they are activated in a T cell dependent pathway or other stimuli. They proliferate, differentiate, and produce antibodies. They isotype switch and go from IgM to IgG and produce plasma cells which are basically immunoglobulin factories. And you have memory B cells also as a product of differentiation. Now, another thing to understand about antibody response is the primary and secondary response. Primary response, so first time activation of the B cells, B cell mediated antibody secretions, usually there will be IgM will be more than IgG before the class switches to IgG. In secondary response, the response is steeper and quicker and much more, and most of it is IgG, and some situations you may have IgA and IgE also. So this is just to highlight again the plasma cells which are long-lived, and they can go quiescent and stay as factories for antibodies for a long time in the body. These are usually produced by activation of B cells beyond the germinal centers in the lymphoid follicles, where you're talking about marginal zone B cells. When they are activated, they undergo transition to a plasma cell. While follicular B cell, if it is active, we have seen TFH cells as a subpopulation of T cells. If they are activated in a T cell dependent fashion, they result in formation of memory B cells, which are long-lived and quiescent again. And they are activated whenever an antigen raises immunological challenge. So B cells mediate main graft destruction mainly through circulating donor-specific antibodies if these are preformed circulating donor-specific antibodies, we know that they cause hyperacute rejection after transplant. De novo DSAs are formed after the antigens of the donor are exposed to the immune system of the recipient. They can cause acute and chronic allograft rejection, both humoral. This is when you talk about antibody-mediated rejection, you're talking about donor-specific antibody-mediated rejections. So most common pathway for destruction of tissue is by complement activation. And one way we try to study for antibody-mediated rejection is by estimating C4D in the tissues by immunofluorescence or immunohistochemistry. So we also know that apart from T cells and B cells, there are other cells. So there is, I'm not going to the details of these things, but these are innate immunity. These are not immunity which are in response to a certain particular alloantigen or allorecognition. These are recruited because the Th17 response subset of T cell activation gets recruits these cells to come to the site of allorecognition and cause damage to the tissue. These include neutrophils, eosinophils, macrophages, dendritic cells, mast cells, and NK cells. These are not a part of allorecognition, but part of T cell activation and differentiation, which recruits these cells. And they all produce various cytokines and interleukins and tissue necrosis factor, alpha, beta, all these are produced. They cause direct cytotoxicity by inflammation. And the final pathway for all these is to produce complement activation. Now, a little bit about complement, which is also part of the innate immunity. This is a family of more than 20 plasma proteins that include enzymes, proenzymes, enzyme inhibitors, and glycoproteins participating in the complement cascade, which helps in resolving the antigenic challenge. Either it can be microbial or immunological antigen-antibody reaction. So most of the times when you talk about transplant, you're talking about antigen-antibody reaction causing activation of the classical complement pathway. Classic complement pathway, it is the only pathway in complement activation which requires an antibody. There is a sequence of activation, and again, the final product is production of membrane attack complex, which causes cell lysis. These bore holes into the cell membranes and kill the cells by cytolysis. And in the cascade, as it goes on, you also have certain anaphylatoxins, C3A, C5A, which act as anaphylatoxins, and some help in enhancing the immunogenicity of the antigens presenting to the antigen presenting cells. Now let us see what are the, I'm not going into the laboratory part of testing, but I will introduce you to the requirement of testing and what exactly are the tests that we do. How do individuals get sensitized? What are the events? One is transplant. So whenever you test for histocompatibility or immunogenetics, you always need to have a history of transplantation, pregnancy, transfusion, infection, and vaccination with, if vaccination has been done with human cell line derived vaccine, sometimes you may have short-lived antibodies. So you need to always have this history in hand. So traditionally, cross-match has been considered as a veto step, where donor cells and the recipient serum was used. It was a single, the basic cross-match, where if the cross-match induced cell death of lymphocytes, you do not transplant. If it is negative, you go ahead and transplant. But it was a very initial crude way of doing it. But cross-match has been refined over a period of so many years. So in the laboratory, when we actually do a cross-match, you do a total lymphocyte cross-match. You have a T cell cross-match, B cell cross-match. So these are all topics by themselves. There is a cytotoxic, complement-dependent cytotoxicity cross-match, which is the only cross-match recommended as a cell-based cross-match. The AHG cross-match, that is anti-human globulin enhanced cross-match, it increases sensitivity. DTT cross-match to remove the effect of IgM antibodies, which are going to cross-react and cause a false positive result. Flow cross-match, it increases sensitivity, but still it is only for risk evaluation. Pronase cross-match removes the FC fragments of immunoglobulins. For example, if you give rituximab, it can cause a false positive cross-match. So in those situations, you treat them with that history. The laboratory will introduce a step called pronase treatment. Endothelial cell cross-match, these non-HLA antibodies can also be recognized on these. There is an auto cross-match where we have discussed about auto antibodies causing false positivities. So you also do in cases where you suspect autoimmunity, you also do an auto cross-match where patient's own serum is incubated with the cells and exposed to the complement system, and cell death is recorded. And there is the recent concept of virtual cross-match where you actually do not do a test but use the results of two different tests to come to to predict whether if you actually do a cross-match, it will be positive or negative. So the initial cross-match, the basic cross-match that we used to do, it used to either veto a transplant or it used to say go ahead and transplant. But now for about over 20 years, there has been a concept of risk definition. So it is not enough to just deny transplant to a patient with a positive cross-match. It is important that we try to evaluate the person and stratify the risk. So they had defined the risks as high immunologic risk, where there are high levels of circulating antibodies specific for mismatched donor HLA present at the time of transplant. That is a high immunological risk. And intermediate immunologic risk is low level of DSA present at the time of transplant, which can be dealt with by various techniques of antibody removal or immunosuppression, or a historic DSA. Previously, when you have done the donor-specific antibody test, but it was positive, but it is not detectable at the time of transplantation. You have removed them or they are not present. But it does not eliminate the risk of memories kicking in. So you call it as intermediate immunological risk. There is nothing like a low risk in transplant. It is always standard, intermediate, and high. So if there are no donor-directed sensitization to HLA, you call it standard immunological risk. So these risks have been defined by various guideline forming bodies like ASHI, BSHI or BTS and FE. The BSHI guidelines are the best. I would encourage anybody who wants, it's very readable and understandable. And ASHI guidelines are mostly tuned to giving guidelines to the laboratories on how to perform the test. Now, why is it important to identify these antibodies and stratify the risk? Because if we do not identify them correctly, they can result in hyperacute rejection. There can be a delayed graft function, accelerated acute rejection, chronic rejection, and sometimes when you are having a highly sensitized patient, if you do not have risk stratification, you may have prolonged waiting times, and sometimes you may deny the transplantation completely. So this is one of the recommended charts for risk interpretation of immunological risk using three main tests. One is complement-dependent cytotoxicity with DTT and AHG. That is a technique recommended. It's a specific technique. It is the total lymphocyte T and B cell cross-match. You have flow cross-match as part of this risk stratification, and you also have single antigen bead assays as a way to identify class 1 and class 2 donor-specific antibodies. You can go in, so anything which has T and B cell cross-match positivity is a high risk, and that is the only veto to transplant. Where you do not have a T cell positive cross-match, but only positive B cell, it is not a veto, but it's a high risk. So you remove the antibodies and go ahead. That's what it means. I mean, every institution will have its own protocol, but this is one of the guidelines prescribed by British Transplantation Society. So screening for antibodies you can do by cell-based methods, where you take the recipient's serum and incubate with donor cells, and something like a mini cross-match. You are exposing the donor lymphocytes to recipient's antibodies, possible antibodies. If antibodies are not present, the complement will not fix, it will not fix the complement system. There will not be activation of complement and no cell death. If there are antibodies specific to the antigens in the donor, if the recipient has circulating antibodies against the donor T cells, they will be identified by forming antigen antibody complexes, and these will fix the complement and induce cell death by forming membrane attack complex. So this is what is called as complement dependent cytotoxicity testing for cross-match T, B, and total lymphocytes. You have another method where you use solid phase immunoassays, where you have Luminex beads on which recombinant DNA technology generated epitopes which are coated on the beads. These are incubated with the recipient serum. You don't need the donor for this test. It is the serum of the recipient which is incubated with the Luminex beads with known specificities coated on them. And if there is positivity, you will detect in the form of, these are conjugated to fluorescence. So you detect as MFI values, median MFI values. So that is what Luminex detects. So there are differences between the cytotoxicity antibody testing and solid phase antibody testing. As per the current transplantation guidelines, it is recommended to do at least one cell-based assay and at least one solid phase immunoassay before you decide on going ahead with transplantation. So cross-matching itself has different ways. One is, I told you about the CDC cross-match, where a simple cross-match. Sometimes if the antibodies in the recipient serum are in less concentration, for example, if there is a small amount of antibody circulating, the complement system will not be able to detect them, because complement requires at least 2 antibodies in close proximity. The crystallizable component of the antibodies have to come together for the complement to fix. In those, it is recommended, as per the current ASHI guidelines, it is always recommended to do an anti-human globulin enhanced CDC cross-match, where you add anti-human globulin. Even if the antibodies are in small concentration, the anti-human globulin will provide the second FC domain for complement fixation. So it helps in increasing the sensitivity of the test. The other one is flow cross-match. So where, you do it, you sort out the cells using the T cell markers, B cell markers, and look for specific antigen antibody reactions on individual cell populations expressed as fluorescence intensities. So all these tests are laboratory defined procedures, laboratory developed procedures. These are not kit based assays. So the laboratory has to standardize these assays in a very careful manner, and it's also important for the nephrologist to identify a correct laboratory which is doing the correct kind of protocol. Mostly the ASHI protocols are very rigid. You should know the sensitivity of the assay. You should be able to understand whether they look for IgM or IgG antibodies separately. You should also know whether they do a B cell and a T cell cross-match separately and a total lymphocytes. So all these variants of cross-match which are there, you should be aware of this as a nephrologist to use a lab for determining whether to go ahead with transplant or not. So the initial CDC cross-match is, for risk stratification, it is always recommended to use multiple assays. Initially itself, when they did a basic CDC cross-match, they found that out of 225 cross matches, 195 were negative, 30 were positive. Out of those that were negative, 8 of them, out of the 203 which 195 which are negative, 8 of them still had a hyperacute rejection, and 6 of them with a hyperacute with a cross match positivity did not have any issues. So it was having some issues with sensitivity and specificity. So having only one single pronged basic cross match in a lab, you should not go ahead and transplant based on the results of that. You should always look for specificity of the antibodies, whether IgG, IgM. You should also look for whether you are doing a more sensitive cross match, whether the laboratory is using anti-human globulin to enhance the sensitivity of the assay. And all these, they need to be validated, standardized. So many steps are there when you come to laboratory. I'm not going to details of those. Flow cytometric cross-match also is a laboratory defined procedure. In a given laboratory, the protocol that you do on a day, and between batches of reagents, the values may differ. So this is not used as a veto test, but used in risk stratification. So one advantage of flow cytometry cross match is that you can, this rituximab, which causes false CDC cross match positivity, can be eliminated by treating these cells with Pronase, and you can still go ahead and do a cross match using flow cytometry. That is one advantage. Virtual cross match is basically it's a recent concept, but yes, well established now, where you actually do not do a laboratory. This is not a laboratory test, but you compare the results of 2 different tests. One, you do high resolution typing for HLA genes of the donor and recipient it's not just the donor, and take the serum of the recipient and screen for HLA antibodies at high resolution, that is using a single antigen bead assay. Using this, you'll be able to identify whether HLA antibodies are present in the recipient. If they are present, what are the epitopes that are expressed on that? What are the epitopes for which antibodies are being raised? And from that, you also know what are the possible candidates who are not fit for organ transplantation. Who can have a, immune response raised against the pre-sensitized individual. So virtual cross-match for heart and lung transplant, we were doing it routinely for a long time. Heart transplant, traditionally, a cross-match is done prior to the actual transplant. It's a mini transplant done in the laboratory before the actual transplant. But in case of heart and lung, the ischemia time is prolonged. So to eliminate that, there is a parallel cross-match which goes on, and previous to the transplant itself, the recipient is screened for antibodies. If there are no antibodies, it is considered as you can go ahead with the transplant and get the results of the cross-match parallelly. There is no requirement. This is as per the BSHI guidelines and FE guidelines. So to cut down on the cold ischemia time, you do a virtual cross-match where if this is possible only if you have the donors typing available, recipients typing available in advance. In India, this situation is not possible because we do not have databases of potential donors. In countries like US, we have a system called UNOS, where the potential donors are all typed and listed out in the database. And whenever the recipient, a potential recipient is identified, his antibodies are screened in the blood and matched with the antigens in the donor typing, pool typing, and the organ is allocated accordingly. So I won't go into the details of some of these. I think it's so antibody testing, when you talk about HLA typing, always do a molecular typing, preferably at a high resolution, but even generic typing at the first field level is also adequate for solid organ transplants. But single antigen bead assay is a must when you look for antibody screening in recipient serum. Any other level, there are other levels, like if you are screening for HLA antibodies, class 1, class 2 antibodies, there is a panel reactive antibody screen test that will only screen and say if HLA class 1 or class 2 antibodies are there without giving you the specificities. But if you have to identify and use these antibodies in identifying risk of rejection post-transplant, you must always do antibody testing at the highest resolution, which is by single antigen bead assay, which is a Luminex based test. So these Luminex based tests now can be up to 500 bead arrays. Traditionally, we have been using up to 100 beads, nearly 100 beads for class 1 and nearly 100 beads for class 2. Different permutations and combinations of epitopes are quoted on them, and the test is performed. There is a software which gives out plots. A negative serum will not have any peaks like this. A positive serum, and I have already told you that almost always you will have every antigen raising antibodies which cross-react with multiple specificities. So even if it is one single epitope, you will have specificities detected in the Luminex assay against multiple types, multiple antigens. So this is because this is one single antibody. One single antibody is against an epitope, not against the antigen. Multiple antibodies are raised against each specificity. One single antibody is cross-reacting with all these. So these any further donor with these types, any of these A alleles and B alleles will cross-react with the antigen on the surface of the donor donor cells and cause rejection. So whenever you do an antibody evaluation, if antibodies are positive, you'll get bunches of antibodies. You'll almost never get one single peak. One single peak usually means it is either a transient antibody or a non-HLA antibody which has been detected in the assay as a false positive. So these are all about Craig's and all. I don't think we should go into the details of this, but just to give you a little bit about HLA antibodies. Patients make antibodies due to prior transplant, pregnancies, transfusions. We have seen this. So always history is important when you're looking any antibodies before you report. You must have this history. And HLA antibodies are generally reactive to multiple antigens. These are cross-reacting groups. Candidates with multiple antibodies are hard to find a compatible donor, because when you're looking for a low risk of rejection, accelerated or acute rejection, hyperacute, you can still remove the antibodies and go. Some of these CREGs, like BW4, A1, some of these are very frequent in the population, and their immunogenicity is also very strong. So using multiple methods also, it is hard to remove these antibodies. And always try, when person is sensitized to that extent, you usually try for matching rather than just cross matching. HLA-C and C locus and DP locus antibodies with MFI, median fluorescence intensity of less than 5,000 on single antigen bead assays, they usually do not cause a positive cross match. They are not considered to be very harmful in solid organ transplant. Though in bone marrow transplants, these are significant. DP antibodies are less pathogenic and amenable by IVIG treatment. So if you want to use guidelines for testing, you have to follow either the American Society for Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics, or European standards, or the British standards, or the Asia Pacific standards. Thank you. It has been a very vast overview of the, I could not go into any specific thing, but just to introduce that there is this HLA, there is ABO, there is minor histocompatibility, and there are polymorphisms, polygyny, antibodies, when you read a report, you should know that a single antibody can represent multiple specificities. These are the general concepts. And overview of how T cells cause allorecognition, how they get activated, proliferate, and differentiate into various subtypes, actions of B cells, and the innate response. This was just an overview, and laboratory part of it, it is quite elaborate, and we cannot go into that in 30 to 45 minutes. Just to give an overview and just to familiarize everybody with the terminologies, at least. This presentation could serve only that, I think. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was actually an extensive talk, and we had the ceiling dose of knowledge on immunology of renal transplantation. I think we have 2 questions for you.
Yes, madam.
The first question is, what are the prerequisites for across the blood group renal transplant?
Blood group renal transplant, I think they look for titers of antibodies and try to remove the antibodies. But only thing with, I don't have too much experience with the ABO system, but HLA I can answer most of the things, how you can evaluate and all. But ABO, I think you have to remove the antibodies, because that's a very high immunogenic thing. You have seen the number of antigens present on red cells and endothelial cells and all that. So you have to completely remove the antibodies below an acceptable titer as per the guideline. And even after some time after transplant, you will have issues with rejection coming in. But I'm not experienced with ABO, because that mostly is in the blood banking domain.
Okay, sir. And the next question is, blood group antibodies developed due to GIT exposure of these carbohydrate molecules. Why don't we develop anti-HLA antibodies when we ingest animal protein like meat? In other words, is there a GIT barrier to development of these antibodies?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Only thing is, we have to remember, when we talk about HLA, we are talking about protein component of the antigen. It's, even if it's a glycoprotein, it's a protein part of it which is ingested into the vesicles, that is broken down into, these peptides which are actually antigen, the actual antigen recognition is against 15 to 20 amino acid sequence length peptides. So individual proteins are broken down into small fragments of 15 to 20 amino acid sequences. And there is almost no autoimmunity against these. These are all deleted. The self-MHC molecules, whichever T cells have T cell receptors, or when the T cells mature in the thymus, any cell which is programmed to recognize the self MHC molecules is deleted by design. So I have not got into those aspects of immune deletion and immune tolerance and all that. But that is an entity in itself. It's quite a complex and diverse thing to understand. But we do not recognize our own HLA molecules. But coming to non-self proteins and all, maybe there are cross reactivities, but proteins are not presented. You're talking about pathogens and foreign antigens being presented to the MHC molecules for recognition by the CD8 or CD4 positive T cells. That does not happen with food that we eat.
Okay. Okay, sir. And the next question is, can platelet infusion or FFB or other blood products can lead to sensitization?
Yes, platelets are very rich with HLA molecules on the surface. So platelet transfusions are one of the significant HLA sensitizing events. Red blood cells, if you search the literature, even red cells are known to express HLA molecules on the surface, though they are not nucleated. The dosage of HLA molecules present on the membrane, red cell membrane, that is enough to sensitize an immune response in the person who has received the transfusion, recipient.
Okay, we are done with the questions as well, sir. Thank you so much for the extensive and elaborate discussion on immunology of renal transplantation. I think, as
Thank you,
already
madam.
told, you gave the ceiling of the knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much, sir. Good night, sir.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.